Welcome back to the debate here on France 24. Tonight, looking at the situation in Iran following parliamentary elections and elections to the Assembly of Experts, which can nominate the supreme leader of Iran. Joining me on set to discuss this tonight, we've got Nigel Coulthard, the president of Cercle Iran Économie. We've also got Nusaybeh Amiri, the editor of Rouge Online, a pro-reform website newsletter. From Oxford in the UK, we've got Payam Akavan joining us there from Oxford University, the founder of the Iran Human Rights Documentation Centre. And also in the studio tonight, we've got Delphine Minuit, a Franco-Iranian reporter who was based in Iran for 10 years. Thank you to all our guests for being with us tonight. We're going to have a quick report just to remind viewers who are just joining us of these elections, what's at stake in them and how they've been passing off so far.
The votes have been tallied following Iran's crucial double election. President Hassan Rouhani's allies have made major gains, but the country's reformists and moderate conservatives could not manage a parliamentary majority. Meanwhile, the country's hardliners, those staunchly opposed to the president's policies, have lost some ground. An Iranian government spokesman said the success of the reformist-moderate alliance would strengthen the country's foreign policy.
The large turnout in these elections will reinforce the power of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran's foreign policy will directly benefit from this situation and will make the most of it in order to achieve the country's objectives.
Along with the parliamentary vote, Iranians also cast their ballots for the Assembly of Experts, a powerful group tasked with choosing Iran's supreme leader, the most influential figure in the country. Iran's hardliners were hit here, with the president and his allies winning 15 out of the capital's 16 seats on the clerical council. Beyond Tehran, conservative hardliners performed better, holding on to many seats in both bodies. But that didn't stop President Rouhani from hailing what he called Iran's new political atmosphere in a post on social media. Friday's election was the first since Iran inked a landmark nuclear deal. The agreement saw the West lift economic sanctions against Iran in exchange for a downsizing of its nuclear program. The president is trying to open the stagnating economy to trade and investment, but his efforts to deliver social, cultural and political change have been largely blocked by hardliners. However, the moderates' performance at the polling booths could be a concrete sign of Iran's changing political landscape.
All right, a lot of big issues to discuss coming out of these elections. We've got a tweet coming through, someone tweeting in the hashtag F24debate, as you can. There we've got BFry1981 saying the results of diplomacy of the Iran deal, that the extremists would have won without the nuclear deal. Let me put that to my panel. Delphine Minuit, do you think that's accurate, or is that overstating the case that without the nuclear deal signed very recently, we wouldn't have seen any change of this magnitude?
That was a fear. That's why everybody was expecting to see what would Hassan Rouhani would do after he was elected in 2013. So for him, the nuclear deal, which was finally signed in July, was a big victory, which led directly last month, in January, to the first step of lifting of the sanctions. And we already see the results now, with so many foreign companies coming back to Tehran, including French companies, Renault, Peugeot, Total as well. I mean, for Iranians, again, it's a sign of hope. It's a sign of change. I was talking recently to a friend who was telling me, finally, I feel proud again to be Iranian. I mean, this country has been considered as a rogue state for so many years, and now it's a country that even the US agrees to talk to, and this is very important for the Iranians.
Nigel Coulthard, can we overstate the importance of the nuclear deal, or is this really going to change the game in Iran?
It was essential. I think there's a very interesting fact to note that the implementation day was the 16th of January, whereas most of the Western observers were expecting it to be in March or April. Therefore, I think the Iranians had it under control. Rouhani had it under control because he wanted to get that under his belt before these elections.
And what about the economic competence of some of these reformist politicians we're seeing now making gains in the elections. Do you think they'll be able to make positive?
Well, I don't want to be too critical, but I was in Iran under both Khatami and Ahmadinejad, and I would say that the reformists in an economic field are rather naive. And it is a good job that some of the pragmatic conservatives, and they're already there in the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Oil are there, and they will bring, they have brought a deal of reality, of pragmatism, which the reformers under Khatami did not bring.
Musabeh Amiri, is there a danger that if there's not progress fast on the economy, that people's frustration could be perhaps used by conservative forces to, well, delay political reforms?
Well, surely, because look at the election this time in the country, in poor part of the countries and cities, the poor people, they have not voted. It's mostly the middle class who have voted because they want the political changes, and they think that political changes would end to the other changes. Yeah, sure, because in a country with all this money that we have, the oil and everything like that, more than 30% of the people, they live under the line of poverty. So these are dangerous, and I think what made the Islamic regime to change their mind and sign this agreement, nuclear agreement, was that they know that people are unhappy, and in fact it was a sort of obligation, they were to.
Let's talk about these elections in to the Assembly of Experts. These were parliamentary elections, but also to this body, 88-member body, which can name the supreme leader of Iran. Now, people are saying, our correspondent Sanam Chantier in Tehran was saying that for the first time in a long time there was actually a lot of debate around these elections, because people saw that perhaps with the aging supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei aging, reports of him being in ill health, that also could be room for change. Do you agree with that, Delphine?
Yeah, this Assembly of Experts, which is elected every 8 years, has a very important role. I mean, the supreme leader, everybody knows he has a cancer. He's 76. So that may be possibly the assembly which will have the delicate role of choosing a replacement for him. So that's why maybe these elections were more challenging than usual. What's interesting is, again, key hardliners have been kicked out of this body. I'm thinking about Mesbah Yazdi. You know, Mesbah Yazdi was known as being the mentor of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. And if you talk to any student in Iran, any activist, everybody reminds him as the, let's say, as we say in French, the bête noire, because he was the theorician of an Islam which favors violence. So his ideas were behind, for instance, the serial killing of intellectuals in '98. His ideas were also behind the crackdown on the first uprising in '99, the student uprising. So for people to see that such a man is out, it's already something important.
Okay, Payam Akavan in Oxford, do you agree that we could be seeing now reform in this institution, in the Assembly of Experts, which could touch the very highest echelons of the state?
Well, the Supreme Leader is 76 years old. He's in ill health, but we don't know quite how many years he will live. And I think that if we see the transition from Ayatollah Khomeini, who had nearly absolute power, to the current leader, Khamenei, we already see that his power is more limited, and he's had to rely on appeasing the Revolutionary Guards, using economic influence and monopolization to win good favor. And that progression may continue with the third Supreme Leader, who may have even more diluted powers. Ultimately, the office of the Supreme Leader is anti-democratic, and any meaningful reform will have to abolish an unelected office of a Supreme Leader. But on economic reform, we have to understand that economic liberalization cannot be separated from democratization. Iran has been run as a sort of system of gangster capitalism, where the Revolutionary Guard elite control vast segments of the economy, which is why they will resist any form of economic liberalization. So I think that there is room for hope, there's room for change, but it will meet with a very stiff resistance. But the reason why I would still think that the situation is optimistic is because when we look at the region, when we look at the terrible situation in Iraq and Syria, I think we can breathe a sigh of relief that Iran has not gone the way of those countries, that the talk of a war and punitive collective sanctions no longer dominates diplomatic relations, and this new context will hopefully de-radicalize the situation in Iran. And the hardliners...
Sorry, just to cut in, but I want to bring in Nigel Coulthard there onto some of your remarks on the economic situation. Now, you were shaking your head when Paya Makaman was describing, as he saw it, the gangster capitalism of the Iranian government.
Well, I don't think one should over-exaggerate the role of the Revolutionary Guard. They have played a key role, particularly in the last 10 years. But I think that parts of the Revolutionary Guard have been very eager to push through the nuclear accord, because, in fact, Iran they have controlling hands on the economy, and there are major obstacles to growing their funds because they are constrained within the Iranian borders. And there are certain parties that have a great interest to internationalize the Iranian economy within the regime. So I think there are obviously factions that do not want that, but I think it's not a blanket and it's not certainly a monolithic Revolutionary Guard. Certain factions really want an opening to the international economy.
Yeah, so in economic...
Just to clarify...
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, just to clarify, I didn't suggest that the Revolutionary Guards don't want the sanctions to be lifted, but there's a difference between lifting the sanctions and liberalizing the economy in Iran. So the lifting of the sanctions could only strengthen the hands of the Revolutionary Guards that have many significant monopolies within the economy. And I think that this will be the internal struggle. Will the fruits of this new economic boom really be spread throughout Iranian society, or will it only increase the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the inner circle?
That's one of the challenges of Rouhani, I believe.
One of the major challenges. We also mentioned their foreign policy, of course, very tense, very volatile time in the region at the moment. And what kind of impact do you think we can see, Delphine Minwi, you're based in Turkey, of these elections, if any, on foreign policy, specifically talking about the situation in Syria?
I think really the impact is mostly on the internal scene. I don't see a big change on the foreign policy, especially regarding the role that Iran is playing in the Syrian conflict. I mean, to go back to the Revolutionary Guards, they are the ones dealing with Syria. It's the Quds group, especially. So I don't see the politicians becoming much more involved in such an issue, or being able to be more involved, even if they wish.
Nigel Coulthard, you would agree with that?
Yes, I think that is another struggle within the regime between the factions of the Revolutionary Guard, in particular Niru Quds, and the General Army. So there's not agreement on foreign policy.
Now, in terms of the impetus going into these elections, I want to change tack a little bit and come back to this debate. But something we were talking about in the first half of the France 24 debate is the fact that many candidates were ruled out by the Guardian Council of Iraq, many reformist candidates, many moderates as well. But nevertheless, there was enthusiasm for this vote, Nusabeh Amiri. What do you put that down to? Is it an online movement that we saw again? I mean, we saw a lot of activists posting videos and encouraging others to vote. Is that a movement that you feel is only going to grow from here?
Yes, it's as you said, it's like that. But the thing is that this parliament of experts, they have never done their job, because they were to to see what the leader is doing, but they have never done anything like that. But this time is different because of the reason that our friend said, because of the age of Khomeini and everything like that. Just look at the line of the people in this election for this parliament. We never see people like that. We have never seen during all these days that people come and for this expert of parliament of experts voted for that. They come there just because they want to say that we don't want Khomeini, and they hope that it happen. You know, it's because of that. But I like to add that from my point of view, I think that Khomeini would be the last wali faqih of Islamic Republic, because as Payam said, he doesn't have that charismatic character of Khomeini. He, personally speaking, he's not as independent and as strong as Khomeini used to be, and he weakened this position. So I don't think that it would have lots of impact on the situation.
So you feel that really quite radical change could be coming soon?
Yeah, without a wali faqih as a leader like Khomeini.
Okay, very interesting. Would you agree with that, Delphine Minoué?
Yeah, probably there may be indeed a weaker supreme leader, even if the structure of the system seems to be very solid and very strong. What I could add is it's been a few years now that there is also sort of a debate on the status of these velayat faqih. The supreme leader could, some people suggest that the supreme leader could be replaced by a college of experts. This is an idea that was actually launched many years ago by ex-President Rafsanjani. So again, to come back to the debate issue, there are talks going on. Nothing is rigid in Iran, and these elections have proven that there can be a change from inside as well.
And after having seen the kind of thwarted revolution in 2009, do you really think that change will be able to be allowed to grow from the inside?
You know, what I see is like from 2009, I mean, we still have in our memories these images of very violent crackdown, but it doesn't mean that people gave up, you know. And again, this election to me is more than anything, it's the victory of the civil society. I mean, indeed, many people ended up in jail. Many journalists were not allowed to write anymore. Even filmmakers were not allowed to work anymore. But they always managed to go around these obstacles. And these people are still very active. They are on the social networks. They are making underground movies, underground concerts. They are writing books that you can read online. And this is part of the hope. I mean, women are very active, students, intellectuals. Look at the university. 60% of the students are women. So it shows that whatever the regime is, whatever the political scene is, there is this very strong civil society which already taste the democracy.
Payam Akavan, would you agree with that after having a taste of democracy, a taste of freedom, it's going to be impossible to put Iranian civil society down?
I absolutely agree. I think that Iran has arguably the most vigorous civil society in the Middle East. I think most analysts could not believe their eyes when they saw millions of people on the streets of Iran engaged in a kind of Gandhian moment of nonviolent resistance, with millions of people from many different stripes and walks of life and ethnic and religious and political groups. So just beneath the surface of repression in Iran is a highly educated, cosmopolitan, youthful population just waiting for the moment when it can find its own voice. And I think that the internal democratic transformation of Iran will also bring around a profound transformation of the entire Middle East. And the policy of the international community has to be geared towards empowering those progressive forces in Iran, which sooner or later are going to come to the surface.
Would you say that change is going to manifest itself in a quiet and peaceful revolution, or do you feel people will once again take to the streets?
Well, certainly my wish and preference is that there would be a gradual non-violent transition, and that pretty much depends on the wisdom of the current leadership in the Islamic Republic that must understand that change will come, and they cannot stand in the way of the widespread demands of this new generation for freedom and prosperity. So I don't think that there are any foregone conclusions. We could still see a period of violent confrontation, or we could see a very inspiring democratic moment. And that's why I think that we need to be cautiously optimistic, and the international community has to send the message to the Iranian government that while it's eager to have a kind of balance of power politics in the region and to reap the benefits of economic investment, that it demands respect for human rights, and it demands a steady but certain process of democratization, because without that, we could still see a very unfortunate situation in Iran.
All right, thank you for that. Nushabeh Amiri, do you fear an unfortunate situation, another crackdown?
With Islamic regime, yes, I have always this fear, but at the same time, I'm very proud of the Iranian people. And I trust on their judgment and the way that they choose for participating in their life. The Iranian, they had one revolution, and this is the result, and then they had the movement of 2009, and we saw the result. So they try to find a better way, and without all these damages that they had. Yes, I have always fear for Iran, yeah.
Okay, on that note, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up tonight's France 24 debate. I want to thank you at home for watching, and also especially thanks to the panel, Nigel Coulthard, Nushabeh Amiri, Payam Akavan down the line from Oxford, and Delphine Minuit as well here in studio. Thank you all very much. That has been the France 24 debate. Well, it's time now for Media Watch here on France 24. I'm joined in the studio by Emma James. Good evening there, Emma. Now, we've been having a debate, of course, on the Iranian elections. There's also a lot being said online about those votes. Plenty of contradictions, it seems.
Yes, it's quite interesting because when you look glance at the websites of all the major news organisations, this is being painted almost uniformly as something very positive, and many media outlets painting it really as a triumph for the reformists. But there are some dissenting voices out there, and just as a counterbalance to those kind of articles, I'd like to take a look at this opinion piece from Bloomberg. It's been written by a man called Eli Lake, who basically dubs these elections as magical. Magical, not because they've been wonderful, but because they have magically transformed yesterday's hardliners into today's reformists. And what he means by that is that basically Iran's Guardian Council disqualified most of the reformists from consideration back in January, he says. Among them, a gentleman called Qasem Jalali. Now, this is a man that Obama wanted marginalised. He was one of those hardliners who was seen as anathema to what the US wanted in Iran, and it was hoped that he would be marginalised by the nuclear deal because, among other things, he'd called for the sentencing to death of two leaders of the Green movement. So this isn't someone that you would think of as being particularly reformist, forward-thinking. Yet he was one who ran on the list of endorsed reformists, and this is the kind of change that he's saying is magical and is kind of disguising really what is happening and what has happened in Iran. He's very critical of the reactions here in the West and the media in particular. He ends this piece by saying that Iran's supreme leader doesn't need to defend legitimacy of the elections because he has plenty in the West who are eager to do exactly that for him. Now, it's a view that I have seen shared by some on Twitter. This tweet is kind of typical, I suppose, of the kind of things that I've been seeing. If by reformist you mean victory for theocrat-approved candidates, detect no change in gay or women's rights in Iran. However, of course, the issue of women's rights is very much in the spotlight because of the fact that we are set to get a record number of women in the Iranian parliament. As many as 20, says The Guardian. Only 8 of them, though, are reformist on what they call the list of hope. Now, among them is Parvineh Salashuri, and they've spoken to her about this in detail, and they quote her as saying this about Iran's current female MPs: they are against women, only their gender is female, but their language is pro-men. So we're going to have to wait to see whether the list of hope can translate into a list of change.
A lot of unknowns there. Turning quickly to look at politics in the US, you've been taking a look at the controversies, the latest controversies, I should say, stirred up by Donald Trump, and there are many, aren't there?
Well, it seems like it will never stop when it comes to Donald Trump. And the latest one centres on the backing that he's received from a former leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, in the past, Donald Trump has disavowed him, but in an interview with CNN this weekend, he failed to do so. And what he said was it would be very unfair to disavow the KKK and David Duke until I do research on them, which seems an incredible thing to come out with.
Know about who they are, and some saying that he knows very well who they are.
Exactly, and it was only on Friday, in fact, that he did actually disavow David Duke's support. And Donald Trump, after this interview, retweeted this saying, as I stated at the press conference on Friday regarding David Duke, I disavow. So why the change? Well, according to him now, he says it was all down to a lousy earpiece and that he couldn't hear the question properly.
He's had problems with earpieces before.
Exactly. It all seems a little convenient, and obviously people are reacting to that. Trump blames earpiece on KKK answer. When question about racism coming through earpiece hit all the racism in his brain, it caused feedback, says this user. Other people pointing to the fact that he has no problem with attacking Muslims, Mexicans, women, Apple, the Pope, and he doesn't seem to need to do too much research and too much reflection before commenting on them. And also this one, Trump called his Republican rivals losers, ugly and stupid. But when it comes to the KKK, he is prudently restrained. Now, what some people are pointing towards is the reaction that Ronald Reagan had back in 1984 when he was up for re-election. This article in Independent Journal saying really it is a lesson for all Republicans how to deal with this one. The politics of racial hatred and religious bigotry practiced by the Klan and others have no place in this country and are destructive of the values for which America has always stood. So said
pretty
Ronald
unambiguous
Reagan.
there.
Absolutely.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much. Emma James there with tonight's Media Watch here on France 24. Do stay tuned. We're going to have the very latest news for you at the top of the hour.